I'd like to introduce today's first speaker, Siddharth Chaturvedi, Senior Director at Capgemini. And Siddharth will be talking about Capgemini's Global Service Desk and how their automation and AI proposition helped them cope with the workload demand driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, Siddharth. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, David. Good to be here.
It's good to have you back. Great to have you back.
All right. The very first question for all such events, can you see my screen?
Not at the moment. I think we're just going to make you a presenter. Right. I think, yeah, unless I'm missing something. Let me just double check. No, I'm absolutely wrong. Got the wrong screen. You're absolutely brilliant. We can see your screen. So over to you. Thank you very much indeed, Siddharth. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. As always, good to be here and happy to share, what our journey for transformation has been, particularly around automation. So quickly, just the insight of what we're going to talk about, what I would like to talk about, of course, insight of who we are as a service desk in Capgemini, what was the impact, approach to outcomes, and of course the outcomes of that approach that we had. So just as a quick glance of who we are, I had the internal service desk for Group IT. We're about 367, 370 odd people spread across 5 different countries and providing support to all of Capgemini, the different tool sets that we have at our availability to provide services are of course mentioned there, so I'll not go into that just yet. But we started off a transformation journey quite early on, about 3 or 4 years back, and last year, as you mentioned, was a real big initiator for us, where the digital initiative started paying off really. And so, what was the impact that on us? So in H1, we were averaging about, H1 March is when we basically went into the lockdown phase. So what was the volume that we're looking at? We're doing about 18,000 calls per week. And post-lockdown, that shot up to about 47,000 calls, about 261% increase. Emails shot up from 9,000 emails per week to about 30,000. Similarly, for chat, there was a very significant increase on people reaching out on the virtual agent and the chat environment, chat options to get support, because it was the easiest way to get hold of responses and get hold of answers to what needs to be done. And that saw an 824% increase on the workload. So we not only were we moving our own teams off to work from home, but during that entire transition period, we were still providing support to all of our team members. So while we started off with about 5 centers, I think by about mid of March, we were close to about 300 unique locations from where the service was being delivered. And what was again, while all of that was happening, because we were able to leverage our investments into the digital area, despite the significant increase in workload, our key indicators around satisfaction from a people perspective on how we were resolving their support issues did not go down. We got one of the highest ratings during that period, actually, at 4.72 out of 5. Our mean time to resolve came down to about 1 day. And this is including service requests and break fixes and everything else. Of course, the OLA, which is the agreements, the SLAs that we measure, that was at 94.6, again, fairly high. And the FTF remained high as well. The outcome at this point of time was really amongst the biggest satisfaction of the investments, and you could see the investments in the entire digital space starting to pay off here at this moment. So how did we really get this done? As I mentioned, we started off early on. In 2017, we came together as from being multiple desks into a unified service desk as such. And at that point of time, we started laying the framework of what we wanted to achieve. And through and through, one of the key attributes always was that we need to embrace digital more effectively. Whatever Capgemini was able to go out and offer to its clients and customers, we needed to be able to do it internally. At the end of the day, all the people that we have within the organization are also consumers in their private life, and they're used to seeing a particular amount of getting a particular amount of support and adoption of digital tools and technologies. So we did the very same thing. So we put up a plan which was far-reaching in terms of the fact that it was a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan, and of course had elements of how we're going to get there. So the very first thing in that plan was the fact that how do we take this thing off, and where do we really start? And it had to have, we decided we have to start small. So we started off by doing task-based or automations. They were not very complex. It would basically be simple activities, simple things which were being done. For example, somebody calling up to get access to a particular folder, or getting added to a particular group or something else of that sort, right? So previously it would take anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes, because you had to open up different systems, grant them access, and so on and so forth. Automated this into a script that could be run by the agents as and when they got a call, but reduce the time frame from 10 minutes or so all the way down to about 2 minutes, 8 minutes saved per instance. While it seems small, but when you're getting thousands of such tickets, the amount of savings that you manage to get is incredible. The second thing, when we were doing this, we realized that a key focus that we need to do is increase transparency with your team members, because as we start talking about automation at the management layer, it's a good terminology to be, good term to be throwing around, but from your team member perspective, often it fills them with dread about the fact that this may take away their jobs, or their profile may shrink, and so on and so forth. So we had to keep them engaged. That is not about replacement, but about doing away with the routine aspects of work, right? Keep in mind that most of these guys have a significant amount of knowledge with them that they possess about how to do a particular activity much better than a lot of time how it's documented in the system. So we kept them engaged, and then we, along with their help, we moved to the next phase where we started leveraging things like the RPA. Now, these were cases where you were working across multiple different systems, and getting a bot in place to mimic human activity across the system was a very natural progression from taking what was previously just task-based to helping make it a robotic process. After this stage is when we looked at the personalized automation. Now, this is where we started really looking at the ticket deflection much more than just the automation aspect, right? Because you introduce tool sets which could typically come into the picture between the user wanting support and user actually having to raise a ticket for that particular fulfillment to be carried out. So this is where we introduce self-service with a lot of tools being put in. We introduce password reset as a automated mechanism as well. And again, while it sounds simple, but putting in a password reset spanning the every different geography, different business units, and different requirements as such was a fairly daunting task. And this took care of roughly around about 30% of our call volume that was coming in. So a very significant reduction in impact for us. Now, we were just starting off the process of introducing AI virtual agents and stuff when the pandemic hit. And it was good that we had introduced the bot at the time that we had, because that's when we started really leveraging the ability to get the users to understand where to go, how to get support without having to wait in the queue or sending an email across, getting a response back or anything from that time. Because it's very different when you have working from office and you have the liberty of being able to tap the person next to you or walking across to the local ID support, to now working from home and trying to do all that all the work that you were doing previously still at the same level. You're working on you're working off hotspots, you're working off mobile data sometimes, and of course in some cases you're working off probably better internet at home. But the complexities changes. However, the way we resolve those complexity, of course, did not. So that's where we looked at how we can leverage the bot more effectively, and we did. And this was also very successful. Right now we're seeing about the adoption is at about 120,000 interactions on a monthly basis. Now from there, where do we go right now, and what is it that we're focusing on is, of course, looking at the preventive and the endpoint monitoring more effectively, right? Because you hear a lot of it about the fact that users satisfaction or users don't believe that the service is up to the mark or anything else. Now, some of that is transaction based, but a lot of times we need a better insight. We need a way to have a better insight into how the devices that we provide to these users are actually performing. And that's where we start looking at endpoint monitoring tool sets and where we want to put into place now. And when we do that, the other aspect, of course, will end up becoming about how do we, now that you've got an insight about how the device is performing or what's happening or not happening, what do you do with it? Can you fix it remotely and or fix it even before the user needs to reach out to you? Simple things like you walking, you're at home, you walk away from where you're sitting to a different place, the Wi-Fi signal drops, and that will have an impact on your video calls or audio calls, but you don't know that. And just giving a simple pop-up notification, it's as simple as that. These small little tasks, these small little automations, things which help prevent users from having to have a bad experience on the device. That's what the intention is for the next steps that we go into. Of course, now what the benefits have been for us, I think it's there in the graph. Again, won't spend too much time, but just the automation, particularly in 2019 when we first introduced the self-help abilities, as you can see, our interactions dropped significantly. The need for having to connect with the service desk or IT dropped significantly. And that's where we really saw the benefit come through. Of course, this year it has gone up, but again, the reasons are very different. So consistently with the help of the automation, our CSAT has been improving. Our time for our time to resolve a particular ticket has been on the decrease. And of course, the number of FTEs that we've got deployed for operational support has decreased, though these guys, from an overall headcount perspective, what has happened is that they've now moved to elevated positions like automation, script developers, the major incident, the process managers, quality managers, and what have you. So I think there has been a lot of benefit on automation. It's not going to go away, and I'm happy that we're leading these changes across in Capgemini. And that's it from my side. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Siddharth. I mean, the first time we talked about this, and I think I can't remember when it was actually. I think it's probably around about June, maybe last year. I was absolutely amazed at the volume increase and how the service that you had there just didn't fall apart. Incredible. And especially that sort of bot, and how that sort of facilitated some of the automation there as a point of contact. So I'll read that again. 8,500, 70,000 contacts a week. That's an 824 increase in demand, which is incredible. And when just looking at some of the slides that you sort of shared there, and again, our listeners, please, if you've got any questions you'd like to ask Siddharth, please do so. We've got a few minutes left. When you talk about self-service enablers using digital triggers, right? What does that mean? I noticed one of your slides. What does that digital trigger mean when you talk about self-service, Siddharth?
So quite a few things. Like password reset is one of the simplistic example, right? So putting that in place, resetting your password resets, not having to rely on the people. One of the other one that we had a great amount of success with was also software deployment. Right? Now, typically, again, I don't know how it is in different sets of people, but we have a fairly well locked down image for our endpoints. Yeah, so we don't want to have too many people installing software on their own end, and that from a security perspective, and that often ends up extending also to freewares that are approved but still need mechanisms to still need the service desk to help install it. So we worked very closely with the endpoint teams and the imaging team, drove up a solution by which we could push these software across to people as and when they needed it, rather than them having to raise a ticket. So they could basically go in onto the catalog library, say, this is what I need, and it gets pushed across to the device in about, it does take time, particularly in the remote environment that we're in, but led to a lot of users getting software much quicker than what they used to in the past.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions that have come through, and one is related to that productivity number that you had at the end there, which again is incredible, really, when you talk about the size and scale of the operation that you've got there. A question about the tips and tricks about measuring self-help, and that's from Stefan. What do you measure when you talk about that productivity metric? What do you measure, Siddharth?
So when we're talking about productivity metrics, and again, differentiating between our automation and from a people perspective, but for me, the automation success story really lied in the fact that what is the volume of tickets we were able to either deflect or fulfill without having to have that come through to a support engineer. From a people productivity perspective, it is different aspects, right? From the amount of time that they're available to be able to, support the end users versus the workload that we're putting across on those folks.
So really, you're measuring the value of the amount of staff things that go into automation as a productivity against human intervention. Is it the difference between? So is it almost the ratio of interactions that you can put through some kind of automative process, and the result of that in relation to what it means? It's people, time, and effort. Yeah.
Yeah, so from a people, time, and effort perspective, so when we're talking about the productivity gains because of automation, that's what we'll typically look at. What is it that we were able to reduce? Now, typically, as an example, agent can handle, let's say, depending on the skill set and stuff, yeah, but our experts can typically handle anywhere between 15 to 18 tickets in a day, yeah? So now if you're able to reduce the incoming load that is on those particular people and have them focus on either tickets that really require manual intervention versus focusing on the minor tickets that they do at this point of time, that's what ends up getting measured. There is actually a very fairly complicated or there's an Excel file out there which measures across different parameters. And Stefan, if you connect with me, I'll be more than happy to kind of discuss those in more detail with you.
Good. And we've got one more, I think. We can just squeeze one more in, I think. And this is from Tom. And he asked a really, this comes up quite a bit. He asked the question about, do you think that the development of automation will eventually completely replace the interaction between the IT department and the end users? What are your thoughts on that? So that's almost the autonomous sort of service desk sort of premise. Yeah. What do you think about that, Siddharth?
I think it's a pipe dream. It's something that often gets discussed, particularly at the apex level, where as a vision, if they talk about a completely autonomous desk or without people intervention required. I think over a period of time, we'll go to a more evolved desk. People are still going to talk to people. There is still a requirement to make sure that the solutions that you provide are aligned in terms of your vision. So, for example, let me take something as simple as the bot that you roll out. Yeah. Now, while the bot may typically handle, your virtual agent may handle a whole lot of queries, you still need to have the oversight in place to make sure that it doesn't go wrong. I mean, doesn't end up picking up the wrong guidelines or responses. So there's still a little bit of oversight required in that particular place. I think over a period of time, what is typically going to happen is our workforce is going to, the service desk is going to increase in its skill sets and ability. So where we've got more experienced people coming in, and they're not only looking at resolving your level 1 topics, but really that's where they're adding value to level 2 and level 3, giving guidance to your end users about how to leverage the system or what is the right system in various places. So I think I see a more experienced and more knowledgeable service desk coming into picture. At least as of right now, I can't foresee a complete removal of service desk, no matter how we look at it. And I've been in discussion with a few product companies who have reduced their support staff, but they still haven't been able to eliminate it.
And funny enough, we've got one more question actually that's come through from Jason, which is about that really. And Jason asks about the reduction in FTE and the increase in terms of development and support FTE, if you like. So it's the shift from the sort of frontline skill set to automation skill set. Now, I'm wondering whether as an organization, right, you've taken the approach to upskill people and move skills across because, well, I think that's just the nature of the beast, I think, really, in reskilling people and giving them slightly different roles to do, or if you've been bringing in specialized automation skill sets or a blend. How have you been sort of managing that shift of needs of skills across the service?
A combination. So we've got a very big focus at Capgemini. Honestly, the people focus is intensive, and we definitely want to keep looking at how do we expand or give people opportunities and have them stay with us for as long as we can have them stay with us. So we've done a blend. When we started off the journey about 3 years back, yes, I did bring in people from outside, people who are more specialist on the scripting aspects and stuff. But over a period of time, what we did was we invested in our people to learn those particular skills, work very closely with these experts, and then come up and start doing it on their own. And of course, with all of them, we've got a very good defined career path, to the extent that we have an agreement with IT as a whole that any position that opens up in the level 3 team, they will take from the service desk rather than going out of the market. So first preference comes to the service desk. We've got people doing scripting across, right from Python to PowerShell to Windows scripting, to people who've actually moved on to being running network SDN, being part of the network teams, to people being part of the database team and application support team. So we constantly upskilling. We spend a lot of time making sure that people get trained. People who complete about 1.5 years or 2 years with us, we make a very concentrated effort on spending time with them to define their next step, their career aspirations, and doing our best to meet those as we go along.
Great. Yeah, that's really good. And I think that conversation, it's been around for a while now, since this sort of bubble happened, probably, I don't know, probably the best part of 4-ish plus 5 years ago, maybe, I don't know, perhaps a little bit less, where we've started to see this happening. And the question was, how do we reskill? What's in place to support the reskilling of people? So that's really interesting to hear that. And yeah, I had no doubt that in an organization like Capgemini, you've got the ability to do that, to move people around and utilize skills as effectively as you possibly can. Superb. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Siddharth. And a really good chance to have some of those questions. So thank you, listeners, for that. So we're going to move on.